You've done this. You showed up 3 hours early because somebody told you a horror story about the security line. You got through in 11 minutes. And now you're standing in a hallway with 2 hours and 49 minutes to kill, holding a $19 breakfast burrito and a $6 bottle of water you didn't want. And somewhere in the back of your head, while you're chewing that burrito, a thought shows up. Somebody is making a killing here. That thought is kind of right. But the actual answer is weirder than you'd guess, and it took me about 4 years and a lot of embarrassing questions to get straight in my head. Here's the short version, and then we'll take it apart. An airport is not an aviation business. An airport is a parking lot and a real estate portfolio that happens to have a runway attached, and the runway is the part that loses money. On purpose, by contract. That's not an accident. That's the design. Oh, and one more thing before we go. In the United States, you almost certainly cannot buy one. Not the way you're picturing. We'll get to why. The two ledgers. Every commercial airport in America runs 2 sets of books under one roof. The first is aeronautical, landing fees, terminal rent from airlines, gate charges, fuel flowage, the plane stuff. The second is non-aeronautical, parking, rental cars, the burrito, the neck pillow store, advertising, ground leases on the land around the field. If I asked you to guess the split, most people say the plane side has to be the big one. It's an airport. Planes are the whole point. Non-aeronautical revenue is roughly 46% of total U.S. airport revenue, almost half. And when you look at what's inside that half, it gets funnier. Parking and ground transportation ran about $6 billion out of $13.2 billion in non-aeronautical revenue in fiscal 2023. That's 46% of the commercial side. Retail and duty-free? 6%. Food and beverage? 7%. Read that again. The garage out front makes 6 or 7 times what every restaurant, bar, and Hudson News in the entire terminal makes combined. Globally, parking is about 24% of non-aero revenue. In North America, it's 43%. We're a nation of people who drive ourselves to the airport and leave the car sitting there for 9 days, and that habit funds more of American aviation than anything you can eat. Denise and the 12%. I learned the concession side from a woman named Denise Kaplan, who ran 3 units at a medium hub for about a decade, a bar, a coffee kiosk, and a newsstand. I met her doing due diligence on a food and beverage operator because I needed somebody who'd actually stood behind the counter. First thing she told me, she didn't set that beer price out of greed. Most airports write a street pricing rule into the lease. You can charge maybe 10% over what the same thing costs downtown. Some airports say street pricing plus nothing. So why is the beer $11? Because her rent was insane. The typical structure is a minimum annual guarantee plus a percentage of gross, whichever is higher. Median percentage rent for food and beverage is about 12.8% of gross sales. For news, gift, and specialty retail, it's around 16.5%. And the MAG plus percentage combo shows up in more than 75% of concession agreements in North America. Think about what that means. Before Denise paid for a single case of beer or a single hour of labor, she owed the airport a check whether anybody walked past her door or not. She said the thing that broke her was February. Nobody flies in February. The MAG doesn't care about February. She got out in 2019. I've thought about her timing roughly once a month ever since. So who's getting rich? So half the money is commercial, and the commercial money is mostly a parking garage? That still sounds like a good business. Where does it go? I had lunch with a guy named Tom Brannigan, who ran a mid-sized airport for 19 years before he retired to a lake house and started answering emails from people like me. I asked him what his profit margin was. He laughed at me, not meanly. The way you laugh when somebody asks a question that has no answer. He said, "I ran a residual agreement. Do you know what that is?" I did not. Here's how it works. Under a residual airline use agreement, the airlines guarantee the airport's bottom line. Add up every cost, subtract every dollar of non-airline revenue, and whatever's left, the airlines pay through their rates and charges. The airport cannot lose money. And here's the other half of the deal, which nobody puts on a poster. The airport also cannot make money. Because the moment the parking garage has a great year, that money flows straight into the rate formula and comes right back off the airline's bill. Tom put it like this: "My job was to hit zero every year, as precisely as possible." There are variations. Hybrid residual is the common one at big hubs, and it carves out some revenue, usually parking, so the airport keeps it outside the formula. Boston and Phoenix run compensatory, where the airport keeps all the commercial money and airlines just cover allocated costs. But the mental model is the point. At most American airports, the airlines are not really customers. They're closer to partners who negotiated a very good deal in 1978 and never let go. The money is under house arrest. But say the airport does end up with cash. Great year, and you're the city that owns the thing, and the potholes on Main Street are getting bad. You cannot touch it. Federal law prohibits revenue diversion. Money generated on airport property has to stay on airport property. Not $1 of your parking revenue can go fix a road that isn't an airport road. I want you to sit with how strange that is as a business. Imagine owning a company that's legally forbidden from paying you a dividend forever. That's a US airport. Which raises the obvious question. If the profits are trapped, if the airline side is engineered to break even, and if you can't take a distribution, then what exactly is the asset? The answer is that it isn't an equity story at all. It's a debt story. Marisol and the $4.50. Marisol Reyes covers municipal credit, and she's the person who finally made this click for me. We were at a conference, terrible coffee, and I said something dumb like, "Airports don't have shareholders." She said, "Right, they have bondholders, and bondholders are worse because they don't vote, they just downgrade you." Airports fund themselves three ways: federal grants, revenue bonds, and a line on your ticket called the passenger facility charge. The PFC is capped at $4.50 per boarding, $4 per round trip, $18 maximum. The cap went to $4.50 in 2001. It is still $4.50 today, in 2026. 25 years. Every FAA reauthorization since has left it alone, including the 2024 bill, because raising it polls like a tax increase, and the airlines fight it like one. Airports wanted $8.50. They got a polite no. Do the math on a big hub, though. 22 million boardings times $4.50 is roughly $100 million a year, before the 11 cents per ticket the airlines keep as a handling fee. Rating agencies love that stream because it's collected on the ticket and remitted straight through, so it barely touches the operating account. That's what secures the bonds. Typical covenant is 1.25 times coverage on senior lien debt service. Marisol's line, which I've stolen many times since: "Nobody owns an airport. People own claims on an airport." What a terminal actually costs. Now the spending side, where the numbers stop being cute. The new Terminal 1 at JFK is about $9.5 billion. Biggest airport public-private partnership in the country, a concession running out to 2060, built by a consortium including Ferrovial, Carlyle, and JLC Infrastructure. $9.5 billion. For one terminal, at an airport that already exists, replacing 3 older terminals. Total debt on the project is around $6 billion. The first phase slipped from June 2026 to November. The demand forecast got trimmed. Moody's revised the outlook. And that's the part I want you to hold on to, because it's the real risk in this entire industry. You commit 10 years and $6 billion of borrowed money based on a passenger forecast. If the forecast is wrong by 15%, the concrete does not care. The bond payment does not care. You still owe it. Add in the boring money. So you might be thinking, fine, big airports are a public utility with a gift shop. Can a normal person own an airport at all? Sort of. There are about 5,000 public-use airports in this country, and most of them have never seen a jet bridge. Grass strips, single runway county fields, places where the busiest day of the year is a pancake breakfast. My friend Ed Kowalczyk got into that world sideways. He was a contractor in Ohio, he flew a Cessna on weekends, and in 2016 he bought a row of T hangars at a county field and then a chunk of the leasehold around it. Ed does not own the airport. That's the first thing he corrects people on at parties. The county owns the airport. Ed has a ground lease, 38 years on the original term, and at the end of it, the improvements revert to the county. What he owns is a metal building and a rent roll, and the numbers are gloriously unsexy. A T-hangar rents for a few hundred a month. Occupancy is near 100% because there's a waiting list at basically every decent field in America. Nobody's built new hangars at scale in 30 years. The building is steel, the maintenance is a door track and a roof, and the tenants are retirees who pay on the first. Ed told me it's the least exciting money he's ever made, and the only money he's never worried about. Rick, and the gas station theory of aviation. The single best business at any airport is not the airport. It's the fuel. Rick Alvarez runs an independent FBO in Texas. FBO means Fixed Base Operator, which is a deliberately boring name for the private terminal where business jets pull up. Lounge, ramp, hangar, ground handling, and, critically, the fuel truck. Rick has told me some version of this speech 4 times. The marble bathroom is a loss leader, the cookies are a loss leader, the rental car sitting on the ramp is a loss leader. It's a gas station with a nice waiting room. Jet A nationally averaged around $8.18 a gallon this past June, taxes and fees included. At the busiest private terminals in New York and Washington, it's crossed 10. A business jet burns somewhere between 100 and 500 gallons an hour. One transcontinental leg can be $20,000 of fuel. And here's the structural piece. FBOs sign leases with the airport, and at a lot of fields, there's exactly one of them. Aspen has a single FBO, Atlantic Aviation. On a 30-year lease, the county renewed in 2024, that runs to roughly 2054. One operator, one price, 30 years. Compare that to Teterboro, across the river from Manhattan, where you've got Atlantic, Jet Aviation, Meridian, and 3 separate signature locations. Operators shop the field every trip, and the posted price can swing $1 a gallon between 2 buildings on the same tarmac. Rick's competitive advantage is that he's not owned by a private equity firm, which, it turns out, makes him a rounding error. Priya, and the $10 billion gas station. A couple of years ago, I was on a panel with Priya Raghavan, who works at an infrastructure fund, and afterward, she said something that reorganized my whole understanding of this sector. She said, "Our fund has looked at airports for a decade and never bought one. We buy FBOs. Watch the tape on Atlantic Aviation. Macquarie sold it to KKR in 2021 for roughly $4.5 billion. This March, Apollo and Singapore's sovereign wealth fund GIC agreed to take a majority stake at a valuation close to $10 billion, with KKR putting fresh money in to stay involved. 5 years. 4.5 to 10. Reporting put KKR's return at something like 15 times its original equity, including distributions. That's 100-odd buildings that sell jet fuel and rent hangar space, and it's worth $10 billion. Signature is the bigger network. 200-plus locations. If Atlantic traded where people think it traded, Signature is an $8 to $9 billion asset, and there are maybe 4 buyers on Earth who can write that check. Priya's framing was blunt, and it stuck with me. The airport is a regulated public utility with capped fees and trapped cash flow. The FBO is a monopoly concession on the same land with no fee cap and a 30-year lease. Same dirt, completely different asset. That's the whole game. You don't buy the airport, you buy a position inside the fence. The privatization graveyard. I know somebody's typing, but what about privatization right now? So let's deal with it. Congress created a program in 1996 to let private operators take over public airports. It got renamed the Airport Investment Partnership Program in 2018, and the cap on participants was removed entirely. 30 years. 3 airports have completed the process. One of them, Stewart in New York, went back to public ownership. As of this year, the only commercial service airport in America running under private management through that program is Luis Muñoz Marin in San Juan, Puerto Rico. Aerostar paid $615 million upfront in 2013 for a 40-year lease, plus an estimated $550 million over the term, plus a $1.2 billion capital commitment. That's the list. An entire federal program, 3 decades, and you can count the participants on one hand with fingers left over. Why? Everybody at the table wants something different. The city wants cash but won't hand over a public asset. The airlines have veto power over fee increases, and they use it. And the outstanding tax-exempt bonds turn into a mess the second private equity walks in. Branson and the graveyard next to the graveyard. There's one more experiment worth knowing about. In 2009, a group of private developers built a commercial airport from scratch with private money in Branson, Missouri, about $155 million. Real runway, real terminal, contract tower, FAA sign-off. The theory was clean. Millions of people drive to Branson every year for the shows. Give them a way to fly in and collect the fees. Passenger traffic came in at less than half of the forecast. Losses ran north of $50 million between 2010 and 2013. Here's what I take from that. An airport does not control its own demand. It's a landlord whose tenants can leave with 90 days' notice and take the entire customer base with them. Gary and the airport that came back from the dead, which is why the last story is my favorite. Gary Nunn does freight logistics in Cincinnati, and he watched the best case study in this whole business happen in his backyard. CVG was a massive Delta hub, 22 million passengers a year. Then Delta dismantled it. Traffic fell off a cliff, and CVG joined the sad club with Pittsburgh, Memphis, and St. Louis, all sitting on terminals built for a hub that left. Except CVG had gates nobody wanted, ramp space nobody wanted, and a location within a day's drive of most of the US population. Worthless for passengers. Perfect for boxes. DHL built its America's hub there. Then Amazon put its air hub there. Well over $1 billion of investment. Gary's point, and he's right. The passengers were never the asset. The pavement was the asset. Nobody knew what it was for until a company that ships packages figured it out. So what are you actually buying? So put it all together. If you buy an airport in America, here's your real profile. Roughly half your revenue comes from cars and concessions. Your airline revenue is engineered by contract to break even. Your ticket fee has been frozen at $4.50 since the year Windows XP came out. Your profits are legally barred from leaving the property. Your capital projects run into the billions and take a decade. And your single biggest customer can leave, in which case you have a very expensive concrete field. That's not a business. That's public infrastructure with a food court. The actual businesses are the things attached to it. The fuel monopoly, the hangar rents, the parking concession, the rental car lot, the ground lease under the warehouse next door. Boring, contractual, unglamorous, and the reason Apollo just put $10 billion into a company that sells kerosene? The runway is the moat. Somebody else owns the castle. So next time you're standing in that hallway with the $19 burrito, look at what's around you differently. The gate isn't making money. The burrito is barely making money. The garage you parked in is printing. And somewhere on the other side of the field, past the fence where you can't see it, there's a guy fueling a Gulfstream at $10 a gallon, and he's the only one in the building with real margins. If this changed how you look at an airport, hit subscribe, because I'm doing an entire series on the businesses that hide inside businesses. Drop a comment with the asset you want me to break down next. And all my sources for the numbers in this one are linked in the description, so go check my work.